He was a ghost made of train whistles and coal dust, living in a forgotten siding station that even time seemed to have abandoned. Each day, hundreds of trains tore through the space, hurtling past with thousands of faces, faces that never stopped to see him, never knew he existed. His name? Irrelevant. His presence? Just a minor glitch in the soulless operational map of the world. He was just the station master. Nobody remembered his name, until a child's gaze pierced through the thick veil of oblivion, revealing the raw, poignant truth of a life faded away like the final echo down the track. The Oakhaven Railroad Station wasn't on any major line. It was more like a somber note in the country's bustling transportation symphony, an ellipsis in the sentence of journeys. Here, time seemed to move slower, coating everything in a sad layer of dust and a stillness that was almost absolute. And at the heart of that stillness was Arthur. Arthur was the station master of Oakhaven. He had been there for so long that none of the rare few who still knew of the station's existence could recall when he had started. His face was etched with the wrinkles of sun, wind, and loneliness. His hair was white as old train smoke, and his gray-blue eyes held a deep, melancholic sorrow, mixed with the sharp observation of a man who had witnessed too much movement while he himself remained still. Arthur's life was a never-ending cycle. Every morning, he would wake up in the small house tucked away behind the station, the smell of bitter coffee mingling with the scent of decaying wood and damp earth. He'd put on his old, worn-out uniform and step out onto the deserted platform. His job was to keep the tracks clear, the signal box working, and most importantly, to wait. He waited for the trains. Most trains didn't stop at Oakhaven. They were just speeding streaks of light, their whistles echoing like a mockery of his stillness. They pulled cars filled with passengers, faces blurring past the windows like faded paintings, never turning to look at the old man standing there, his hand holding an old signal lamp. To them, Oakhaven was just an anonymous locale whizzing by, an empty stretch of track between two more important destinations. And Arthur? He was just part of the scenery, no different from the lamppost or the wild weeds by the tracks. Occasionally, very rarely, a slow train would stop. These were usually old local trains, carrying commuters, elderly folks visiting grandchildren in a nearby town, or curious tourists who had gotten lost. These stops were as brief as a breath. A few people would get off, a few would get on. They were hurried, their eyes focused only on their luggage, on finding a seat, on the next destination. They rarely looked at Arthur. If they did, it was just a fleeting glance, no greeting, no smile. He was just the operator managing the boarding and alighting, a part of the soulless machinery. Even the people living in the small town a few miles from the station had almost forgotten his existence, or at least his name. He was the station master, a title, not a person. Arthur's loneliness wasn't a fierce, shouting loneliness. It was a quiet, persistent solitude that seeped into every corner of his soul like the dust clinging to the station walls. He had become used to it. It was like an unwelcome companion, always there, reminding him of his separation from the world outside. To fill the void, Arthur had developed small habits, his own private rituals. He talked to the sparrows perched on the eaves, gave names to the wild cacti growing around the station. He would read old newspapers someone had left behind over and over, trying to understand a rapidly changing world out there, a world he felt he no longer belonged to. He spent hours polishing the brass signal lamp, making it shine like new, even though he knew its light was rarely noticed by anyone. Sometimes on bright moonlit nights, he would sit on the stone bench on the platform, looking up at the star-filled sky. He would imagine people seeing the same stars he did, people connecting with each other, loving, sharing. He wondered if anyone, anywhere, was feeling as lonely as he was, also looking up at the stars and quietly wishing for a connection. Years passed like the relentless trains. Freezing winters, sweltering summers, autumn leaves falling on the tracks, spring trees budding around the station. Everything changed except Arthur and his waiting. He had grown older, slower, but he was still there, like an essential part of Oakhaven, even though Oakhaven had been all but forgotten. And then, on a dull Wednesday afternoon, everything changed. It was a slow train as usual, stopping to drop off a couple of passengers. Most were elderly, with tired gaits. But from the very last car stepped a young woman and a little girl. The girl had her hair in two braids and wore a bright yellow dress like a ray of sunshine. Her big, curious eyes scanned the empty platform. The woman seemed to be looking for someone, her expression a little flustered. The little girl, not distracted by her mother's anxiety, was instead captivated by the sight of the old man standing by the signal post. Arthur was checking a passenger's luggage, completely oblivious. As the woman called a taxi and busied herself with the luggage, the little girl timidly stepped closer to Arthur. She stopped at a safe distance, just standing and watching. Arthur, sensing the unusual presence, looked up. His gray-blue eyes met the clear, fearless gaze of the child. For a long, timeless moment, they just looked at each other. The child didn't speak, just stared, as if trying to decipher his existence, just as he had deciphered the existence of thousands who had fleetingly passed through his life. Arthur felt a strange sensation swelling in his chest. It wasn't curiosity or annoyance, but something softer, warmer. How long had it been since he had been looked at directly like this, by eyes that weren't judging, weren't hurried, just simply present? Then, as naturally as breathing, the little girl raised her small arm and waved. Just a wave. A simple, everyday gesture for most people. But for Arthur, it was like a bolt of lightning, awakening a part of him that had been dormant for too long. He froze. The signal lamp in his hand almost dropped. His old heart beat faster. He looked at the child, at that sincere wave, and for a moment he didn't know what to do. Decades of loneliness, thousands of trains rushing past, tens of thousands of indifferent faces. It all seemed to dissolve in that instant. The little girl kept waving patiently, a smile blooming on her lips. Arthur took a deep breath, as if for the first time he was truly breathing the air of Oakhaven. Slowly, timidly, he raised his calloused hand. He hesitated for a second, then waved back gently. It wasn't a big, enthusiastic wave, just a small, slow movement, but it contained all the suppressed emotions of a lifetime. The little girl's smile brightened. She waved again, more vigorously. Then her mother called, and the girl ran towards the waiting taxi. Before getting in, she looked back at Arthur one last time, gave him a radiant smile, and waved goodbye. Arthur stood there, the signal lamp still in his hand. He watched the taxi disappear down the dirt road. When it was completely gone, he remained standing, feeling as though he had just woken up from a long dream. That wave. The wave from a completely unknown child. She didn't know who he was, his name, how long he had lived there. She simply saw him, not the title, not the ghost of the siding station, but a person. And she chose to connect. That evening, sitting alone in his small house, Arthur didn't feel as lonely as usual. That wave was like a small fire warming his soul. It reminded him that he still existed, that his presence could still be seen, could be acknowledged, even if only by a tiny spirit. He reflected on the meaning of being seen. It didn't have to be fame. It didn't have to be being known by the whole world. Sometimes all we need is a moment of genuine connection, a recognizing glance, a small action that shows we are not entirely alone. The days that followed in Oakhaven seemed subtly different. The train whistles still echoed, the coal dust still coated the platform, and most trains still didn't stop. Arthur still did his job as he always had, but something inside him had changed. He was still the station master nobody remembered the name of. The world outside still forgot him, but he no longer felt completely forgotten himself. He carried the memory of that wave like a treasure. He started looking at the passing trains with a different eye. He no longer only saw indifference and oblivion. He saw the stories unfolding inside those cars, the partings, the reunions, the dreams, the hopes. He realized that, just as he was a small part of the larger picture of life, so was every passenger on those trains. They too had their loneliness, their waiting, their moments of being seen, and their moments of being forgotten. He realized that his presence, though not widely acknowledged, still had meaning. He was the one keeping the path safe for those journeys. He was the one maintaining a tiny link in the vast network of transportation. His work, though quiet, was still a contribution. One morning, while sweeping the platform, Arthur saw a small wild flower pushing up through a crack in the concrete. It was tiny, pale purple, but resiliently reaching for the light. He stopped and looked at it. He saw himself in it, small, overlooked, but still existing and seeking meaning. He never saw the little girl in the yellow dress again. Perhaps her family was just visiting and had returned home. But the memory of that wave never faded. It became a symbol of connection, of being seen, of hope. Arthur remained the station master of Oakhaven, the man most people didn't know the name of. He still waited for the trains, still did his job meticulously. Loneliness was still a part of his life, but it no longer defined his entire being. He had learned that the meaning of a life isn't just in how many people know you, or how much you are remembered in history. Sometimes the greatest meaning comes from the smallest moments, from unintentional connections, from another soul seeing you, even for just a fleeting second, and recognizing you as a person. The life of Arthur, the station master nobody remembered the name of, is a profound reminder of the quiet existence of so many people in this world. Those who do jobs that go unnoticed, live simple lives, seemingly invisible. But each of them carries within them a rich inner world, a story worth telling, and a desire to be seen, to be acknowledged. The child's wave wasn't just a simple action. It was a ray of light tearing through the darkness of oblivion, an affirmation that no matter where we are, whatever we do, each person has value and deserves to be seen. Arthur, the old station master, still stands there, under the wide sky of Oakhaven. The train whistles still echo, carrying the stories of the world. But now, when the whistle fades into the distance, he no longer only hears loneliness. He hears the resonance of life, of hidden connections, and of a precious lesson taught to him by a small spirit, that even in the deepest forgetting, a spark of recognition can still find its way through and warm a heart that has been cold for too long. He was still the station master nobody remembered the name of, but now he knew he had been seen. And that was enough. It was everything. That wave, simple and pure, became Arthur's only legacy, a legacy not etched on a gravestone or in history books, but etched deep within his own heart, a silent testament to the extraordinary power of a small act of kindness in a vast and often indifferent world. And then one day, Arthur's final train will arrive, without fanfare, just a quiet journey to a distant place. When that happens, Oakhaven Station will be emptier than ever. Dust will continue to settle thick. The signal post will stand there, silent. The trains will still run through, carrying new stories, new faces, and in all likelihood, none of them will stop to ask about the old man who used to stand there every day, holding the polished signal lamp. His name will continue to be forgotten by the world. But somewhere, perhaps far away, a young woman with braided hair from long ago, now grown, might hear the distant echo of a train whistle in her memory, and she might suddenly recall a small station, an old man with sad eyes and a timid smile, who waved back at her on a dull afternoon. And in that brief moment, Arthur's name will live again, not on a sign, but in the heart of the one person who saw him when the rest of the world looked away. His existence, though quiet, was not meaningless. It touched another soul. And in the lonely journey of a lifetime, sometimes all it takes is one moment of being seen, one fragile connection, to light the flame of hope and affirm that we are not entirely alone. Arthur, the station master nobody remembered the name of, found that truth in the wave of a child. And that is his story, the story of a quiet life illuminated by a small act of kindness, a contemplative tale about forgetting, connection, and the profound significance of being seen.